we were just having a really good conversation at lunch that kind of helped me frame kind of where schools are right now. And both of you just said you've been in education a while, and I think it'd be good if you could kind of help us see what you see. What's different? Maybe what are the things we think about our schools and our community versus the reality that you all are facing, and maybe even just share a little bit of your particular school's situation.
This is my 26th year with the EVSC, and when I started teaching, because I was an English teacher, I always got put on the committees to write grants. So I happen to know that 26 years ago, the poverty level at North High School was about 30%, and I happen to know that the poverty level today is closer to 50%. And so that's a huge increase for our community to be working with what children are dealing with, how they're growing up. The percentage of children in a building that are living in poverty does make a huge difference. I felt like as a child, I went to McGarry, which is a Title I school, and I always felt like our family had what we needed, but we were a one-car family. We didn't have a washer and dryer. My mom stayed home part of the time, worked part-time part of the time, depending on what the needs in our family were. But I always felt like I had an advocate. My parents divorced when I was young. I always had my mom. My mom was my champion. She made sure I was successful. I had a church community that rallied around me. And I think that's what kids need. All the research says, right? One champion for every child gets the job done. And so when I look back at my own life, I think, wow, I would not have been successful without all of the mentorships, the people that just intervened and said, you're going to be successful. One of those was a teacher, and that teacher made sure I went to college. And if not, I would be the best Walmart greeter you have ever met. I'd be so good at that. Or I'd go work at Disney World and be the lady with the white hands as you were leaving the park. Have a great day. It's magical. And instead, I got the chance to do that as a teacher in a school because people believed in me and they loved me and supported me. And that is what every kid in our schools need. So then, fast forward from being a teacher at North High School to starting at Glenwood and feeling like I had some concept of what struggle looks like, and then experiencing the struggle of Glenwood's kids and knowing that it is nothing like what a working class family experiences in this community. It is so different than what anyone can imagine if you have not lived it, breathed it, and worked alongside people who are in it. It is extraordinarily different than any other experience I've had in my career or my life. And it was a life-changing experience to be the principal there. And then to leave Glenwood and think, wow, I'm going to Plaza Park to be the principal, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do there. Like, I found my niche, and I know what I'm great at. And, one of those things is building kids up and making sure they're successful and working with their families and feeling that passion and commitment that every kid in this community has got to have the opportunity for success. And if we rob them of that because the right people are not in their lives, our community will be so adversely affected. So I go on to Plaza and literally was just trying to figure out, what is my role here? What is my job here? What am I supposed to bring to this school for a good 3 months? When I realized the tipping point in this school is so different than people's public perception of it. Because the public perception of Plaza Park is the one that's in my head from being a student at McGarry in the 80s, which kids at Plaza back then had all the things and kids at McGarry did not. When I went on to Harrison High School, the social stratification was in the parking lot with people's vehicles, right? And I had never seen cars that looked like that, so I didn't know what a Toyota Supra was. It's dating me, right? That's dating me in this conversation. Right? It was a sports car and it was sharp. And I would go home and say, did you know all of these things? And of course my mom knew all those things. I just hadn't had that exposure. Our kids at Plaza Park are at this pivotal tipping point where 63% of our community is living in poverty and no one knows it. So no one reaches out to Plaza Park and says, hey, do you need help? And we need so much help. But in order to ask for that help, people feel like we're destroying the fabric of what Plaza Park is to the community. And will people not send their children there because they then begin to realize that this tipping point is off? And my thing is, let's take care of all the kids and not worry about the reputation. Because if you take care of the kids, you don't have to worry about that because the reputation follows you. But I think in your heads, right now you have a school that's close to your house and you think you know what it is. And it may not be that. And so like re-examining what all of our ideas are about what school is really needs to occur. And the only way that that can occur is to work alongside them and ask them what the issues are. And it would really probably surprise you.
Yes, and I would agree with Tamara, and much the same way that I grew up in a two-parent home in a rural community, one high school in the community. I always had everything that I needed. And my parents may have struggled, but they never let us know if they were just trying to make it paycheck to paycheck. So when I came to Evansville and graduated from U of E and was fortunate enough to get a job at Bosse High School, I became a basketball coach, life-changing for me. Life-changing to be a teacher there and a basketball coach, because the connections that I was able to make with my players, I can tell you that I had a player call me at midnight. They had ran away from home, needed my support. I went and picked up that child, took them back to their home, their apartment, to walk into an environment. I was, awestruck, because here I am, probably a 25-year-old, very early in my career, and to see this child sleeping on the floor on nothing but a mattress. Very eye-opening for me. But those types of connections, to know that I had an opportunity, I think that was kind of a breaking point for me. I have such an opportunity as an educator to make a difference in a child's life. And it may not be all of the children that I've had through my 33-year career, but I can tell you that there are a lot. And that's one of the things that we try to instill in our staff, is that you can be that champion. You can be that child's best hope, even on your worst day. And you can totally change the trajectory of their life. And so of the people that I see here in this room today, it just takes you saying to yourself and making that commitment that I can be that champion, I can make a difference, and it will. It can change a child's life. So I would just encourage you to collaborate, to reach out, and to know that it just takes, our kids come to us with such baggage, and they walk through the front door and they're carrying a backpack, but what they carry inside their backpack is not just a notebook and pens and pencils. It's all those adverse childhood experiences that they have, that we have to, at some point, peel the layers back on that onion, and get to the real core and root of what the concern and the issues are. And so that has become a struggle that Tamara and I worked together with over the 7 years that we were together, and that we still work on today. I can tell you that I met a man this summer working at the city swim meet that said, "Hey, what is it that you do?" And I said, "I'm the principal at Glenwood." "Oh, I heard that's a really rough school." And I've had that also said to me in my years at Bosse High School. "Oh, I'm so sorry that that's where you work." No, it's been the biggest blessing in my entire life to spend my career at those two schools and to work with the families within that community. So again, what you heard from Tamara about perception is so very real. I encourage you to get into schools and see what schools are really all about. Come and see my little kindergartners. Come up and hug your leg. I mean, not only can you change their lives, but I guarantee you they will change yours, and for the better.
Thanks for sharing that. One of the things I wanted to ask you guys was just what kind of church partner is a really good church partner, including things like what about sharing faith? Like, where does that conversation happen? Like, is that something that you guys have to work through together with your church partners? Are there rules that we should know? Maybe there's rules we've made up in our head that aren't real. There could be lots of things there. So there's some dynamics there that I want to make sure that we're at least hearing from your perspective. What's a good church partner look like?
I think a great church partner is one who reaches out and says, "We'd like to partner." I think any partner that reaches out to a school and says, we have people who are passionate about children and we want to help you. Awesome. I mean, we cannot do this by ourselves. I'm telling you. If you talk to most educators in this community, the ones that are, and I believe all educators are passionate about children, some more than others, but I mean, we're tired. We thrive on being that tired. Like, it is so amazing to be exhausted because you helped people all day. I can't describe to you how great I feel when I go to sleep at night, and I might have had the most exhausting day, but that whole day was exhausted making other people's lives better. It is the best job you could ever have. And having said that, I go to bed every night thinking, there were 11 things I should have done today I did not do. And, also just knowing like there's a child in my community right now that is on my heart because that child does not have the right people around them to be their champion. And I cannot champion every child. There's one of me and 700 of them, and I have to figure out how to make champions for them. So a great partner is one who reaches out and said, we want to socially mobilize to help you make children's lives great. And whatever the ways are going to, they're going to bubble up from the conversations that you have about the need. So we were describing how the partnership Crossroads evolved at Glenwood, which predates me, and started with the previous principal, and it has now carried on through Angie. But it looks very different today than it did in 2010 when it started. And every conversation that has led that partnership started between a member of the church, someone on the outreach committee, and a teacher or the principal saying, here's a need. And then that church member saying, I know how to fill that need. I have 5 friends. We'll come Tuesday. And then all of a sudden, there's a tutoring program, and 5 educated people are helping kids learn how to read. And it's just starting because you had lunch together. So a great partner is that. When you ask yourselves, what do schools need? There are things as educators we're not allowed to do. Public money and the way schools are set up with the separation of church and state, clearly there are laws that say, we only do certain things. I'm waiting for all those laws to be challenged, right? Here's the reason why. If we can give public money to private schools through the voucher program and they can talk about God, I'm just waiting for someone to tell me we can't. Really? Like, if public money can be spent on that, then we should be able to talk about God everywhere. But that's my personal opinion, which I'm not allowed to share on behalf of VSC, so I won't. But, there are things we can't do. When Angie and I were together at Glenwood, we lost a child. That is traumatizing on so many levels. And you can't pray with your staff. But we could call Eric Cummings and ask him to come and pray with our staff. And he did. And it was a changing moment. When I changed jobs, Jeremy came out and said, hey, we hear you guys are struggling. And we may have been struggling with that change a little bit. And we weren't supposed to pray at school about it because there is that separation for us that we have to live by so we can keep our jobs and keep the good work going. But Jeremy doesn't have to live by that. And he prayed with us in Angie's office. It was a changing moment for all of us, for him to recognize we needed a little extra love that day. And it was fine that's the way that it came. But had we prayed in the office together at school, that would have looked real different than Jeremy being there with us and leading that for us. Are there rules? Absolutely. Do we bend them sometimes? Maybe. I hope you're not taping this. You are, aren't you? Sometimes we bend those for the betterment of kids, and that is the way that it goes. But it takes a village to raise all the children, and our village isn't connected in all the ways it could be.
So true. I have learned one thing from Tamara and working with her for 7 years is that always try to find a way to get to yes. Okay? If you have to put your foot down on a no, it probably is going to center around a safety issue. So we really work hard to get to yes on most things, keeping in mind that the student is always at the center of every decision that we make, and their well-being and their academic progress is at the center of all of our focus. For us, Tamara speaks very eloquently about what a good church-school partnership is. And she's the one that really helped solidify that foundation at GLA. But I will tell you that it has evolved throughout the 7 years we have been together, and especially over the last 3 years. And I really feel like the connections now that we have with Crossroads and specifically with Potter's Wheel, the alignment that we are now creating with kids to provide that 360-degree wraparound support system, both on the social-emotional learning side of things and now also on the academic instructional side of things. I'm really looking forward to the next 2 or 3 years to see the progress that our students will make on both counts.
Great. I also just want to make the comment that both of you have talked about like long-term commitment being a really important part of the partnership as well. And we're gonna invite Jeremy Evans and Chris Fleming from the Potter's Wheel. Jeremy's from the Dream Center to join us up here as well and talk about some of that, like how the long-term commitment. Here, you guys can have these. The long-term commitment, but also just their perspective of how they've built great partnerships with the principal and the staff and the school. And Jeremy, we're going to get to also a Harvard course that some of our friends in our community took together on church school partnerships, because I want him to share a little bit about that with you guys. But maybe just we'll start with the principals on that long-term commitment comment. Any comments you want to make about why that might be important and what the difference is between that and let's just do a backpack drive one time and then be done versus a long-term commitment? And then you guys can share on that too.
I would just say, all help's good help. When people volunteer to give us backpacks, we hand them out to kids, and that helps families. So everything's a win that you can do to help a child in a school. The long-term commitment aspect of it, for me as a principal, I always felt like if there's a need and I don't know how to fill it, Chris was not the person at the time that I became principal, but was there when I was there as principal at the end. Whoever that person was, it didn't matter what the changes were at Crossroads. Someone was in that role that I could call and say, this is a need that's coming up, and I'm wondering if there are ways that you see that we could come together to meet this need, and some new thing would develop out of that conversation. So the long-term aspect of it is, as a principal, I'll speak for Angie because she won't say this to you, it's extremely hard to lead a school where everyone's in need. It's so daunting, the problems that you're working through on behalf of families that have nothing to do with education, just to get their child in the seat every day to be educated. And so to know that you have someone you can rely on is very powerful as a school administrator. And in light of the way that kids view it, kids of poverty, kids in general, today are used to people walking away from them. And they learn not to trust people by somebody coming in for a minute and not being there the next. And so the longer the commitment to the child, to the school, to whatever, to the idea, right, the more that you teach children how to trust.
I think that long-term commitment helps us to sustain progress. And so again, yes, coming in once or twice, that's great. But when you can have that continual partnership, to see how that continual partnership has evolved over the past years, and the good that it's doing for kids, the collaboration now that we have, it's such a deeper level of collaboration where now it's also borderline, not just Glenwood receiving, but also being able to give back as well. And that's kind of the next step for us as we move forward, is how can we now give back to our Crossroads community? How can we give back to our Pottersville community so that this is a give and take and us working together in a collaborative spirit?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if the word's been used yet up here, but I think that relationship is really what we're talking about. Just like they're talking about, needing to know who are these children. It's about the kids. So as we explore all of that, we may not know that in a one-off opportunity, but an ongoing relationship building with staff at school and also with the students that we're all trying to support. That relationship really is such an important piece.
A pastor I know once said, the further you are away from a problem, the simpler you think the solution is. And I would encourage you all to think that over. I believe that, Tracy Beal from School Connect in Arizona said this, whatever your church is passionate about in humanity, I promise you can find it in a school. Schools are microcosms of our community, and whatever issue it is that you're fired up about, I can show it to you at Glenwood or at Plaza or at Delaware, where we serve. What I'll tell you is, going to Chris's point about relationships, I'll just share with you my experience with principals, and you've seen a little bit of this with Tamara today. They're kind of like sheriffs of a Wild West town. Like, they kind of do whatever they want to do until they get in trouble. I love that. There's nothing I love better than breaking a good rule. And so through our work at the Dream Center, we've gotten to bring praying people into schools to talk to kids about Jesus. And that feels like a pretty big deal and feels like the kind of thing that somebody would say, well, you could never do that. But we do it every single day, and I know you do too. And it's awesome. It's so much fun to take what I get to do in church and take it into a school. Yeah. So we took a course with the Leadership in Faith Institute, I think is what it's called, at Harvard University about church-school partnerships. Several leaders in the room here today were part of that group. And it was just highlighting and exploring several different models for church-school integration throughout our country. They actually took us through 6 and learned a lot, had good conversation with the people that we worked with. And they talked about a 3-tier system that I'm going to try to explain to you now. So tier 1 is when churches come to schools with answers and say things like, you need backpacks. Here's some backpacks. That's fabulous. And as they have made clear to you today, they're happy to take that help. But what I would love to see those conversations revolutionized into what they call a tier 2 relationship, which is when a church comes to a school and says, what do you need? And then just go do whatever they tell you they need. If they need backpacks, get them backpacks. If they need toothbrushes, get them toothbrushes. If they need a dunk tank, go find them a dunk tank. Whatever the case might be. One thing I'll tell you before we talk about tier 3 is one of our principles at the Dream Center is when you're building a relationship with someone, you got to win the first time. So if they ask you for whatever it is that they ask you for, if you don't win the first time, it's going to be hard. But if you can win that first time, now you're a trusted source. Now you're somebody who, I know I can come to you and get what I need. That's exactly what they need. And then the other thing I'll say to you about principals is that maybe besides pastors, they're the busiest people on earth, and it can be very difficult to get time with them. So you got to be very flexible with their schedules. Summer is a fantastic time to have meetings with principals because they don't do anything during the summer. Tier 3 is where I think we are, and I think where you would like to say that you are, which is where you are analyzing the systemic and structural problems that schools are facing and coming up with collaborative solutions alongside the school. So not saying, what do you need, but saying, what is it like? And how can we make what it's like better? That's not going to be backpacks. That's not going to be doing a food drive and having people drop it off on Sunday. That's going to be we've been at it for 3 years with Delaware, and I got no solutions. It's a long, hard slog, but that's the real transformative work that our community and our schools really need. Would you agree with all that stuff I just said?
And I would add, sometimes we don't know what that.
Yeah.
This is great. Thank you for that. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, you're going to have a question about that later. So mark that in your head what that meant. Thank you, Jeremy, for saying that. I think it'd be great to just hear from you guys as you're working together and also trying to partner with churches in working together in one particular school. So just talk to me about the challenges of finding a church partner in this space, but also like what is the possibilities that you imagine with kind of the human and social capital of churches leaning into these partnerships that you guys have established in your particular organizations? And then you guys can chime in with what they say.
Gosh, that's a big question. Let me just talk a little bit about what we do and unpack that a little bit. And Chris and I do a lot of the same things. So we work at Delaware. We provide staff members who are full-time Dream Center employees who work half their day at Delaware and the remainder at the Dream Center. We do a ton of work what we call school integration, just trying to help our programs feel like Delaware programs and vice versa. It's challenging. As someone who's thinking about trying to get help from churches, it's challenging because I feel like churches have all the things to do that they really want to do a lot of the times, and that maybe they're all set on things to do and they're not looking for more things to do. But I would just say this, there are about 250 churches in Evansville. Ross will tell you there's one church. There's about 250 churches in Evansville, and there's a little less than 50 schools. So if we could get 20% of the churches in Evansville to pick one school and bless their socks off, like imagine the beauty that we could create in our community.
Yeah, I think I would add to that really, people are just people, right? Whether you find them in a church, whether you find them working in a business, whether they're a volunteer at Potter's Wheel or at the Dream Center, people are just people. and giving them something to believe in that's bigger than themselves, a place that they can actually create change around one child. That's about all the mobilization strategy a church needs. Because kids are worth doing whatever it takes to make the change for a kid. So I think one of the places that we sometimes get in trouble is trying too much to find structures or processes and all of that when it's really all about the kids.
I just want to add one more thing, which is I have this equation in my head, and it works in my head. I don't know if it works in real life, but this is the way the equation works in my head. Maybe, Ben, you can mention this when you come up. The equation is, if you have someone who goes to your church, and because they go to your church, they find out about the Dream Center, and they love the Dream Center, they'll love your church more. Does that sound good? I think that sounds good, and I would love to see an opportunity to see that play out.
Well, I'm going to start with the second question, which was, what are the possibilities? And I'd say they're endless. We don't even know what they are yet. All it takes is human beings connecting on behalf of making the community better and greater. And if that starts in a school with children, that's awesome. And if that starts in a park, that's awesome. But since we're here talking about schools, I would say this. We've seen a lot of amazing things happen in church partnerships already, and I don't think they've reached their limit of possibility. And think of all of the ones that haven't begun. Plaza Park doesn't have a church partner right now, and I lift that because you should know that. I think a challenge for schools is, if I go to a church, do I risk offending all the churches in my district because I went to that church? And I've definitely been in situations in my career where churches backed out because other churches moved in. It doesn't matter how many churches. It doesn't. I mean, we can use all the support we can get, right? So our district spans the entire east side of Evansville. If you could imagine Green River Road from Delaware Trace apartment complex above Lynch all the way down to Park Lawn Cemetery belongs to Plaza Park. And everything east of that to Newburgh. Can you imagine how many churches are in that definitive group that would be within our district, and we don't have a church partnership? So I would say this, like, all it takes is one phone call. And sometimes that phone call doesn't come from the school because we don't know to whom we can reach out. And in my first year at Plaza Park, one of the things that had been lifted to me as a leader was there had been a lot of loss at Plaza Park of a student life. And one of the things that was said to me was, as a challenge, can you please go in there and try to figure out how to make that stop? And, I didn't feel like that was my expertise or something that I was going to be good at. And I was very, very nervous about taking that on as a challenge as a leader. And all of the partners that I reached out to in my first year at Plaza Park were mental health leaders. Every single partner I reached out to was to help me figure out, how do we make sure no child at Plaza Park ever takes their life again? And so our church is going to be good at that? Yep. It's just that you weren't my first thought, because my first thought was, I don't know how to fix that problem, and people in the mental health community do. But everybody knows how to fix that problem, and that's being kind to each other and taking care of one of each other and teaching each other that we matter. So a church partnership could probably have fixed that problem faster.
I've seen the possibilities happen throughout my work at Glenwood, because it's evolved into what this partnership is with Potter's Wheel today. And again, the possibilities as we continue this partnership are endless. Very excited with what we have with them. And I will be honest with you, Chris and I have started this summer actually meeting on a regular basis and enhancing that collaborative spirit so that we can do what's best for kids and be on the same page, so that what they're doing in their work and what we're doing in our work is really mattering for each child. And because we know that if it matters for a child, that we're going to be able to change our community for the better. And that's the ultimate goal. Throughout this pandemic last year, I guarantee you we would have drowned if it had not been for Potter's Wheel and the support that they brought into our building each and every day. Chris came in a couple weeks ago and just said, "Hey, can I pray with you?" I said, "Please, please." And I can't tell you how uplifting that was for me afterwards. After we meet, every time we get together, I just feel a renewed sense of, oh my goodness, I can do this. I really can do this. And so it's not only, it is for the kids, but I will tell you that for our staff and for me personally as the leader of the building, it is, it's just one of the most uplifting things that I can think of, to have that, knowing that I have that person that's going to come in and be able to give me kind of that renewed spiritual sense of I've got this, I can do this. Because when Tamara and I worked together, we had each other, and I would always walk across to her office and say, okay, shut the door, I've got this issue, we need to chat. And there was no judgment there. And the same if she had to come to my office. But sometimes as the building leader, like, you feel like you're on an island. You're trying to be all things for all people. And that one small thing that you didn't do for someone now becomes this big, huge problem that you have to fix. And you have to fix it immediately. And so to have that extra layer of support from our partnerships is just, sometimes that's what keeps me going day in and day out, in addition to the kids, of course.
I would add that in my first year at Glenwood, which I felt was really challenging for me professionally, every month we had a meeting at Crossroads with a committee of people, and at the end they would pray for my leadership. I had never in my entire life had anyone pray specifically for me. It was life-changing. And also it was very uplifting, very bolstering to know, gosh, sometimes I'm going home every day wondering if I know how to fix this problem. Do I know how to do this? That was that was a huge challenge that we took on all those years ago. And to know that there were 15 people in that room that believed in me that didn't even know me, that was really powerful. So even if you just do that, go home tonight and pray for the school leader that's closest to you.
Look around here, slow down. You miss a page if we run about. I'll be ready when the pieces fall tonight.